Okay, so today we're going to look at developing fluency in reading, and I want to put it into a wider context, put fluency into a wider context at the beginning, and that is, if you want to have a well-balanced language course, you need to have 4 strands in your course. So the first strand is the strand of input, and that means the opportunity to learn through listening and through reading. Oops. Listening and reading. Oh, not doing very well here, gosh. And then the second is you need a strand of output, and that's learning through speaking and writing. And then you need a deliberate learning strand, and that's got lots of things of vocab, grammar. Okay, folks, come on, move down. There's 3 empty seats here, yeah, and there's 2 here, 1 there. Move along, folks, move along. Don't block out the seats in the middle. And then the 4th strand the 4th strand is the strand of fluency development. Just move into... Who's sitting here? Anybody there or not? No, just use the seats. Use the seats, it's okay. You can't reserve seats here. Sit here, sit here, sit here. Yeah, if they're not here, they're not here. Okay, and then the 4th strand is the strand of fluency development. So the idea is that each one of these should have the same amount of time in a course. So about 25% of the time should be spent on reading and listening, but reading means extensive reading, and the listening means like extensive listening, where you focus on the message and things like that. And 25% of the time should be spent on speaking and writing, where the learners talk to each other, they talk with the teacher, they have monologues and things like that. And then the writing part is they write, trying to communicate messages and so on, that sort of thing. And the deliberate learning strand is where you study language features like vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation, spelling and discourse and all of those sorts of things. And you do it by deliberate attention and rote learning and that kind of stuff. The 4th strand is the fluency development strand. And this is the strand where you learn nothing new from the point of view of language, but you become really good at using what you already know. I have lots of stories about fluency development. One of my stories about fluency development is I lived in Japan for a year or so, and I used to go to the post office and send a letter back to my son in New Zealand. And I'd go into the post office and put the letter on the counter, and the man would take it and weigh it, and then he'd say, "How could you do it?" And I'd go, and so he'd get his calculator, type the number on the calculator, and show me. Okay, now this went on for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I thought, this is stupid, because I know all of the numbers in Japanese. You ask me what the number should be, I tell you what the number is, no problem. But when I go to the post office and put my letter down, I can't understand what this guy says. So I sat down with my Japanese teacher, and the teacher said numbers, and I pointed to the numbers. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, write the numbers, and the teacher says 3, 6, 10 in Japanese. And I'm pointing like this, you see. And we do that for a few minutes, really hot and tired, and then come back again and do it again. And after a little bit of practice, you get very fast at recognizing. And then, of course, 10 yen or 10 won is not going to buy anything. So you have to then go to make a little matrix of the up to 100 and so on like that. And you do that practice, getting fast at recognizing. And I still remember the day when I went into the post office, put my letter across, and the guy says, "Hak Sanjay," and I pull the right money out of my pocket, put it on the counter, walk out the doorway and trip over going out the door probably. But that's fluency development, making the best use of what's already known. And in the fluency development strand of a course, okay, who's stolen the chalk? Come on, put your hand up. Who's stolen the chalk? I must have eaten it. It's disappeared. It's like my wife in a supermarket. It's like the Bermuda Triangle. Go into a supermarket, disappeared. Never see her again. That's why we have cell phones. Call up each other in the supermarket. Now I've forgotten what I wanted to write. Okay. The fluency development strand needs to have separate fluency development for listening, speaking, reading. I did that on purpose in case I lose this piece. And I found the other piece. Okay. Needs to have separate it focuses on listening, speaking, reading and writing. So the nature of fluency development, the conditions required, are listed on the handout. So the number one condition here is the learner's focus is on receiving and conveying meaning. So fluency development activities are essentially message-focused, communicative type activities. Not always, but most of the time they should be like that. The second one on the list is probably the most important one, and that is fluency development materials have to be really easy. So if you do reading fluency development, the learner should be reading really easy reading material. There are no unknown words, no unknown grammar. Everything is easy. Everything is known. It's the same with speaking. When they do speaking development activities, what they're saying are things that they already know well, using words that they already know, and so on. And it's the same with listening and writing. So that's the requirement of easiness. And for any fluency development activity, that's the most important essential requirement. If you want to make a fluency development activity, make sure it's easy material. The third one on the list is some pressure or encouragement to perform at a faster than usual speed. So I think this is probably the number two, if we rank them, the second most important requirement. You'd work with easy material, but you're sort of pushed to go a little bit faster with that easy material than you would normally go. And then the number 4 on the list is there is a large amount of input or output. So that fluency development activities should take up about a quarter of the course. And so there should be large quantities of reading for fluency or large quantities of speaking for fluency. And so quantity is very important. So they are the conditions. The typical activities are speed reading. So speed reading course is, I talked about that in the plenary. Skimming and scanning, repeated reading is where people read the same material again. 4-3-2 is my favorite speaking fluency activity. Learners work in pairs and you choose a really easy topic. I've just done a book called What Every EFL Teacher Should Know, and in the back of the book there's a list of 100 easy topics. You can just photocopy, blow it up, put it on the wall of the room, and you don't have to think of what will the topic of the 4-3-2 activity will be, because you've got a list there and the learners can just choose from that. So the learners get into pairs, and then one learner talks to the other learner, tells them about that topic for 4 minutes. It's a very easy one. Then the teacher says, change partners. And if you did it in a room like this, not so suitable, then the people at the end of the row would move one back, and then you would have a new partner and you tell exactly the same talk, but in 3 minutes. And then change partners exactly the same in 2 minutes. And the idea is that the decreasing time puts the pressure, meets the second condition of putting pressure to go faster than usual. And the repetition of the talk and the choice of the topic makes it really easy. So that meets that first condition. And the fact that you speak for 4 minutes and then 3 minutes and then 2 minutes gives you 9 minutes talking in about 10 minutes of class time, which then satisfies the quantity requirement. And then the fact that you have a new audience for each talk makes it more meaningful communication, because you're telling something, you're not telling the same person the same thing 3 times, which would then lose its communicative function. So by changing partners, you then satisfy the fluency development condition requirement of a message focused or conveying meaning. So you're still conveying meaning. So that 432 then meets all those 4 fluency development requirement conditions. 10-minute writing is another one. People are starting to do research on 10-minute writing now. Learners just write for 10 minutes each day. And the teacher says go, and then they write about anything they like. And the teacher doesn't mark the work. It's particularly important you don't mark the grammar or anything like that. The teacher might glance at it and say, really interesting, write some more about this next time. Or tell me more about that. Or I didn't understand what you wrote here. Explain it more next time. And you just respond to the meaning. And you could say, the grammar errors will become, fossilized and things. Well, you can deal with them in another strand of the course when you do language-focused learning. But for fluency development, it's important not to slow people down by concentrating on errors. Because if you concentrate on errors, then you won't increase the speed of your writing. That's 10-minute writing. And so you've got, where are we? And listening to easy stories. I'm just waiting for research to be done on developing listening fluency. With the new technology of digital recorders, where you can now speed up or slow down the recording and it still sounds good. This is just fantastic. You just think of that for fluency development activity, where you can listen slowly, say at 80% of the normal speed, and then you've done that, and then you click it up to 90 or 100%, the normal speed, and then you go 110% of the normal speed. It'd be fantastic things for developing listening fluency. Okay, so there's a whole range of activities then across these 4 skills of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and each one of these should take up a quarter of this strand. So being very mathematical, that means that 1/16 of the total course time, so it's 1/4 of 1/4, should be listening fluency development. And 1/16 of the total course time should be speaking fluency development. So one quarter of 1/4. Yeah, you get that? Now, you don't want to get too hung up on 1/16. I've got a problem. I did 3 seconds instead of 1/16. Don't get too worried about that. But it's just a way of trying to provide some rational way of saying, well, how much should you do? How much reading fluency development should you do? Or how much speaking fluency development? How much time should you spend on it? And so this way of looking at the strands and how you divide up the strands is trying to give some answer which is at least repeatable and based on some principle. If our principles change, then we'll change the quantities. But at least it's good to have some rational way of deciding. So now what I want to do is to look at reading fluency in more detail. Now when people read, their eyes do not move smoothly along the words or the lines of the page. Their eyes actually jump from one fixation to the other. So if you're reading, you'd focus on this word, and then your eyes jump to the next word that you're going to focus on. So your eyes actually make those jumps and fixations. So these points of looking at something here are called fixations. And these jumps here we call jumps. There's actually a more technical name for them. They're actually called saccades or saccadic jumps. If you want to impress people that you've been to the conference, talk about saccadic jumps. Okay, if you want them to understand, just talk about jumps. Now, it used to be thought that as your reading speed got faster, your jumps got bigger. But that turns out not to be true. Nowadays they measure eye fixations by putting a little band around your head with a camera, and then they focus the camera onto the pupil of one eye, and then you have to look at a point on the computer screen, and then they calibrate it so it matches, and then when a text appears on the computer screen, your eyes fixate and jump, and they can track all of the jumps. The hardware is actually, and software is quite expensive. It costs about $40,000, or used to. And so, I think we had one program in our university, the psychology department had it. And so other departments would go and line up to use it and so on like that. One of my students read on the web you could actually make your own by getting a camera, and he had some kind of cap with a ruler tied to it and a camera with a rubber band, and I thought, this is getting a bit shaky now, and in an attempt to get cheaper eye tracking measure. But what they found is that, in fact, people focus on most words, so that within 100 words of text, there are around about 90 to 95 fixations. And even when you read faster, you still fixate on most words. Some small words like and the might be skipped, and you just deal with them in your peripheral vision or filling in with your knowledge of the grammar. But in general, people who are reading normally focus on the vast majority of words. Long words can get more than one fixation. And there's a paper, I think, at this conference given by someone arguing that when you measure reading fluency, instead of measuring words, you should be measuring standard words. Standard words are 6 letters, and that gives you a more precise measurement of reading speed and so on. Each fixation takes around about, on average, about 0.2 of a second, so 200 milliseconds. And so that means in 1 second, you could do 5 fixations. Yeah, because 5 times 200 equals 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second. I did mathematics as well as whatever else there is. The jump from here to here is very fast, and the speed of the jump is around about 20 milliseconds, so 1/10 of a fixation. So when we do calculations about reading speed and fixations, the speed of the jumps is a very minimal factor indeed, because the jumps are made very fast. And so 200 milliseconds. Now, you could see 200 milliseconds is also about the minimum time. It is really the minimum time that the eye takes to focus after a jump. And so that means that if it's 0.2 of a second for one fixation, 5 fixations per second, how many fixations per minute? Have a talk to your neighbour, folks. Come up with the answer. How many fixations could somebody make within a minute? Yeah? I'm just checking that you're with me still. Okay, don't put up your hand if you want to give the answer. Excellent. Everybody wants to give the answer. This is the best teaching technique I have ever learned. Yeah? Don't put up your hand if you want to give the answer. Good. Well, you didn't put your hand up, so you want to give the answer. 300. Whew. People who don't put their hand up usually don't know the answer, so you've done very well. But I made a mistake. You're sitting in the front row, so that makes a big difference. Yeah, so that's about 300 fixations per minute. And that is really about the upper limit of normal reading speed. And that means if your reading speed is very slow, less than 100 words per minute, and a lot of learners of English as a foreign language read at a speed of less than 100 words per minute, then by doing fluency development activities, you can get up to around 300 words per minute. But that then becomes the upper physical limit. If you read faster than that, and some people do read faster than that, it means one of two things or two of two things. It means you are missing something in the text because you're not fixating on most of the words, and you bring a lot of background knowledge to what you're reading, and so you don't need to do so many fixations. You can say, I know what the rest of the sentence is going to be about, so I just jump to the next sentence. So when you get faster than 300 words per minute, it's reading, Jim, but not as we know it. It's a different kind of reading. You're starting to move into scanning, skimming, that kind of reading. So if you get, speed reading course, read at speeds at 800 words per minute or 1,000 words per minute, well, they're talking about a different kind of reading. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And what makes it a bit more complicated is that when people read and they make fixations, sometimes they don't jump forward, they jump backwards. And it's called a regression. And so they jump to here and then they think, oh, I'm not sure I understand, so they might jump back again. Okay. Now, the regressions roughly balance out the fixations that we don't make, because we don't fixate on 100% of the words, we fixate on around about 95% of the words or so on. Regressions are about, 15, maybe more or less. And when you put the regressions up against the words you don't focus on, you still come out at around about 300 words per minute. So they sort of balance each other out. Okay, here's a problem for you. And the problem is, you now have some basic understanding of the physical things that happen when you read, about your eye movements. Let's imagine that someone has done a speed reading course. So you measured their reading speed at the beginning by giving them a text and seeing how long it took them to read it and answer the comprehension questions. You don't measure the comprehension question time. And then you do a speed reading course and their speed increases. Then you measure, yep, it's increased. Now, what changes when somebody increases their reading speed? So we've got jumps, fixations, and fixations. We've got, sorry, was it? Okay. We've got length or time of the fixation, and we've got the number of fixations. So there are two things here. And then we've got regressions. That's about everything, isn't it? Yeah? Nothing else that we talked about? No, that's about it. So what happens then when someone increases their reading speed? What changes for each of those four different things which are listed on the board? Some might not change, some might change, but where will the change occur and what kind of change will happen? Okay? Work with your neighbour for a couple of minutes, then come up with the answer for me. So someone says, I've increased my reading speed from 100 words a minute to 200 words a minute. So what has changed according to those things? Okay, have a chat with your neighbour. Okay. Oop. Okay. I learned how to switch it on. Okay, what about jumps? So does the speed of the jumps change as you increase your reading speed? No. So that remains unchanged because the jumps are very fast anyway. They're 20 milliseconds. So there's no change there, yeah? So no change. Okay. The time that you fixate on a word, does that change? Yeah. And how will it change? Decrease. So that means you focus on most words for a shorter amount of time. Because when you're reading slowly, you look at the word and you try, what does that mean? And you try and bring the meaning to your memory and so on. And you might focus on a word for a second or even, 1.5 seconds or something like that. And when you get more fluent, then your fixation times reduce. What about the number of fixations? How many points you fixate on? Oh, sorry, so this will change, okay? So the length will be shorter, okay? And what about the number of fixations? Yeah, the number of fixations will get less. We did an experiment once with people reading hiragana, syllabic thing. And what we did was to get them to read the same story 3 times, and we measured their speed each time they read the story. And what was interesting was and then we'd say come back the next day, and they'd come back, and then we'd start on a new story, and we wanted to see at what speed did they read the first reading of the story. Was it higher than the first reading of the previous story? And of course we found something which sort of looked like this. You read the first story and you went up to here. Then when you came back the next day, you started the next story around about here, and then went up like that, to the 1, 2, 3 readings for each story. So we could see a building up. But one of the comments of the people who was involved was really interesting, because what they said was, when I started reading, I was looking at each letter. And then when I got to about passage number 5, I was starting to look at whole words. And so what had changed was the unit of language that they were working with. And this would be a reduction in the fixations. So that when you read a language very disfluently, you have to look at parts of letters to see what's the difference between p and b and d and g, yeah? Where it goes this way and that way. And then when you get better, you can recognize a letter at a glance, and then you can recognize a word at a glance. So your unit that you work with gets bigger. But this also means that the number of fixations get less until you get to about the word level. Yeah. So the number of fixations get less. Okay. Now what about regressions? Yeah, they probably get less as well. There'll always be regressions when people read, because their mind doesn't always keep up, or their mind stays ahead of what they're reading, and therefore they've got to go back and just check and do that again. Yeah, so that's what happens then when someone reads. Now, how do you increase reading speed? So we're on the back of the page now. The most efficient way of increasing reading speed is to do a speed reading course. And you get learners to read about 20 passages, and these passages must be very easy. They must be well within their vocabulary level and well within their grammar knowledge. So the passages need to be simplified or adapted text. You can get speed reading courses at the 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,000 plus academic word list, and I think 3,000 word levels. And basically what you need is about 20 passages with comprehension questions to encourage the learners to focus on the meaning of what they're reading. The comprehension questions have to be very easy. In fact, the comprehension questions with a speed reading course are a sort of a confidence trick, because you make the questions so that even if they didn't read the passage, they could probably get half the questions correct anyway. And the questions shouldn't focus on little bits of detail. They should focus on the general gist and ideas of the passage. Because if you start focusing on bits of detail in the questions, the learners will then slow down when they read the next passage, because they're preparing for a detailed question about how old somebody was or what year they were born or something like that. So you have to make the questions more general based rather than focusing on particular detail. And so then what the teacher does, if you're using the free speed reading courses, 20 passages, you get, say, depending on the size of your class, if you have more than 20 students, then you get 2 sets, you make 2 photocopies of each passage. And I used to put them in plastic bags when I worked in Indonesia. It was very cheap to get plastic bags, and you just put a passage in a plastic bag. And with these 40 bags, then learners would just grab one of them and then do it. And they've got their own sheet of paper where they mark off the one that they've already read. And then you say, okay, are you ready? Go. And when you say that, the learner's heads down and reading. And on the blackboard, you have, or the whiteboard, you have something like this. You put this here for the minutes, and this is for the seconds. Nowadays, you could use your data show and get a timer program, which when you said go, then the time starts clicking over and it's shown on the thing. But when I wrote speed reading courses and used them, they were far away, those things. And so then what happens is the teacher just sort of sits and watches the learners just to see what's happening. And the reason you go like this is you want to see if their lips are moving. Because if their lips are moving, it means that they'll read probably no faster than about 150 words per minute. Because the normal speaking speed's about 150 words a minute. And so Michael West used to recommend, God rest his soul, he was the father of graded readers and extensive reading, I think. He used to say, put a pencil in your mouth, because then if you start moving your lips when you read, the pencil falls out onto the desk. Now, but anyway, the teacher just looks and sees what's going on, and then after about a minute or so, then the teacher then rubs off the 0 for the minutes, and then should be standing here, actually. I'm doing bad teaching. And points here. So you're looking at your watch, 10 seconds, 1 minute, 20 seconds, 1 minute, 30 seconds, and every 10 seconds you go like that. And then when another minute has passed, you rub off this, meaning that 2 minutes have now passed, and then you point like that. And then when someone finishes their reading, they look up, and if you're pointing here, then they write down 2 minutes, 30 seconds on a scrap of paper. And then they go and turn the paper over, answer the comprehension questions, get the answer sheet, mark the comprehension questions scored out of 10, and then there are 2 graphs or a combined graph where you convert your time into words per minute, and you put that on your graph, and then you put your comprehension score on the graph. And the idea is for your comprehension to stay at around about 70% or 80%, and your reading speed should go up. And almost invariably the reading speeds do go up. And learners get great motivation from seeing their speed track its way up. In a study that was done in Korea, they looked to see what kind of increases do learners make. Are there sudden jumps and then you reach a plateau and then you jump and then you get another plateau? Or is it a gradual increase? Or is it very erratic increase and so on, reflecting the social life of the people who are doing the speed reading? If you had a bad night or a long night out before, your reading speed goes down and so on like that. About 90% of the learners just had a gradual increase. Each passage seemed to add a little bit more to their reading speed as they did it. A few people had a plateau form and a few had a very irregular form, but most were just making a gradual increase by far. Let me think. So that's how you do a speed reading course. And so then that finishes, that takes about probably 7 or 8 minutes. And the first ones you have to explain to the learners what to do and, get the passage and that. And when you answer the questions, don't look back at the passage. You have to do it from your memory. and here's how to get the answer sheet. You train them in the mechanics of doing it. And then, if you have a really good student in your class, you can say, you're really lucky because I'm going to let you run the speed reading today while I go outside and have a cigarette or what other vice that I want to indulge in that day. But you can try and get yourself out of the work so someone else is controlling the time and saying stop or go or something like that. So with the speed reading course then, you'll find that almost every learner will increase their reading speed, particularly if their reading speeds are less than 100 words per minute. If you want to work out the most reliable way of seeing what someone's reading speed is, they should probably read 3 different passages at different times, and you take the average of those passages. When we did research, we tried many ways of calculating the before and after speed. The most conservative and the most reliable was simply taking the average of the first 3 and the average of the last 3. Because if you take the first passage, then learners don't really understand what it's about and have very slow speeds. And so you're probably overestimating the gains. Good. Okay. So in the study in Korea, the average increase was 52%. So they increased by 73 words per minute, this group of students. You always find substantial increases. In a way, it's something that's almost unbelievable. If somebody said, by spending about 7 minutes for 20 times, which is just over 2 hours in total, you can increase people's reading speed by at least 50%, and quite a few people will double their reading speed. You wouldn't believe them. It sounds too good to be true. But in fact, it does work. So it's really worth doing. We also looked to see whether the increase in the first 10 texts was greater than the increase in the last 10 texts. Was it worth reading the second 10 texts or stopping at the first 10? It turned out it's worth doing all 20. Most people make their biggest increase around in the first 10, but they still made gains in the second 10 texts as well. So it is worth persisting to the end. And so that's a speed reading course. There's been research to look at, how many times a week should you do it? Should you do it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week? My PhD student who looked at that couldn't find any difference between doing it at those different times. I sort of felt it should be around about 3. It's like exercise. If you only do it once a week, then all the rest of the time you're back to where you started when you get to the other one. But it doesn't seem to be like that for speed reading. I'd probably recommend doing it at least twice a week. And it only takes a few minutes each time to do it. There is 2 kinds of courses you can use. One kind of course is the free ones, which are available on my website and on Sonia Millett's website. So this is her name. She spent a lot of her teacher development time writing speed reading courses. And so if you just type Sonia Millett into Google, that'll take you to her website and you can download free courses. Compass Publishing has a book, Reading for Speed and Fluency. And that was a very interesting book to do because we tried to figure out a way to make the text even easier for the learners. And the way that we came to make the text easier was to have a group of 5 texts on the same topic. And so learners then would read a text, answer comprehension questions, measure their speed and comprehension and so on. Then they'd read another text on a closely related part of that topic. And they would do that for 5 times before we switched to a new topic. And the idea was that by sticking in the same topic, you bring a lot of background knowledge to the later texts in that little series. So I was quite pleased with that idea. And so that's meeting the criteria of easiness, which is the number 1 criteria for fluency development. Okay, I think I stopped there. It's worth doing speed reading. For a small investment of time, you get a very big increase in reading speed. And if you can read faster, you can read more. And if you read more, you learn more vocabulary and improve your reading skill more. Thank you very much. Well, we have 2 minutes for questions.
More recent research on the number of fixations shows that at the word level, the number of fixations doesn't decrease. We thought that learners originally began to chunk words and fixate on more than one word, and therefore that was part of their reading speed.
Yeah, people used to think that you moved from words to chunks and you needed only one fixation for a chunk, but that's not true. So but up to the word level, your fixations can decrease, because instead of parts of letters or parts of words, you're then focusing on whole words. But beyond the word level, there doesn't seem to be a big change in fixations. Yeah, go on.
A question about doing the number of timed readings to do within a week. Have you ever tried to do more than one timed reading per session? There's been a couple of studies where people have done two. It should be okay. I think the only thing you'd have to be careful is fatigue. And if you found that the second reading was slower because of tiredness, then it's probably not a good idea. It's quite a demand to ask someone to read about 500 words in just 2 or 3 minutes and then answer 10 comprehension questions and then do the various calculations and things. It's quite a bit of work. Yeah. Good, thank you.